Wow, just wow. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about last night's 2026 Michigan U.S. Senate Democratic primary and what ended up being the closest political primary we've probably seen this entire cycle of 2026 between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. So with now about 95% of the vote in, according to Decision Desk HQ, Abdul El-Sayed has officially been declared the winner, getting 48.48% of the vote. Haley Stevens getting 47.51% of the vote, only a margin of under 1 percentage point separating El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. In terms of overall vote numbers, Abdul El-Sayed is 740,945. Haley Stevens, 726,045 votes. You're looking at a gap around like 15,000 votes separating El-Sayed and Haley Stevens in a primary that was a lot closer than many had, especially in the final few days. So very, very, very close results out of the state of Michigan. Should be worth noting as well that Mallory McMorrow, who did drop out of the race about, I think, a month or 2 months ago, did still get 61,249 votes, getting about 4.01% of the vote. So argument could be made that she played spoiler, but she did drop out of the race. So, I mean, nothing really she could do in that regard. But yeah, she does get 4% of the vote, so it was important to mention here. And this was honestly a massive shock, a massive, massive shock. Heading into this race, Abdul El-Sayed seemed to be the prospective favorite and be the favorite for a really, really long time. And it became very quickly, as I mentioned, a two-way race between El-Sayed and Haley Stevens once Mallory McMorrow dropped out of the race. Joe Tate dropped out of the race like months before that as well. And it became just a massive, very, very close proxy between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens, between the Democratic Socialists of America Democrats and the establishment currently in charge Democrats, between El-Sayed and Stevens. And look, El-Sayed was leading for a very long time and by a lot. I mean, you look at these final polling numbers on the averages across all of them here. El-Sayed, 50.9%. Haley Stevens, only 39.6%. Mallory McMorrow, 4.2%. 5.3% of the vote undecided. So even if Haley Stevens won all of the remaining undecided vote that was left out there, it still would have been enough for El-Sayed to win, and win by at least 4 to 5 points. And you look at the final few days of polling, again, I always caution this, and I've been burned on primaries before the last few elections. Primaries are very unpredictable, and up until the last few days, there's always a lot of undecided vote left out there, so you never 100% know how it's going to go. But look at the numbers Abdul El-Sayed had here. SoCal Strategies, 56%. Zenith Research, even up to 59%. Emerson College, usually very reliable pollster, started with Sayed at 54%. And you look at Stevens down here, 40%, 39%, 38%. And really just the surge on election day for Haley Stevens really came out of nowhere. And that made it a very close race. And even seeing the political markets represented here, we've known for a while now Abdul El-Sayed was the favorite to win this race. But we can even look in the last day what it looked like. Heading into election night, when the polls closed around 8 p.m., Abdul El-Sayed had about 100% chance to win. It looked like it was completely over. And then as some results started coming in, Haley Stevens doing much better than expected, we actually saw the odds shift a very considerable amount. Abdul El-Sayed fell down to 75%. Haley Stevens went up to 25%. Still, Abdul El-Sayed was massively favored, but it definitely moved a lot in Stevens' direction. And then the results shifted back to El-Sayed as more results came in. Another late surge for Stevens, around 7%, around 1:41 a.m., as we might have got some results out of Wayne County. And then Abdul El-Sayed went back to being the favorite and winning decisively. But for the votes itself, I mean, what else is there to say other than this was a lot closer than everyone expected? I mean, you look across the map here in the state of Michigan, the green is El-Sayed, the purple is Haley Stevens, and look at all the purple. And you got to start in Michigan, you got to start with the city of Detroit and Wayne County. Haley Stevens won here. She won by about 6 points over Abdul El-Sayed, 51.34, 45.48. Mallory McMorrow getting 3.18% of the vote. This was a big talking point in a lot of Democratic circles and a lot of media coverage last night, was how well Haley Stevens did in Detroit, and can Abdul El-Sayed get a lot of that support onto his side for the general election against Mike Rogers in November. That's going to be a very big question of what happens next. But Wayne County, Detroit was a very important one to see it come in for Haley Stevens by about 6 points. We can look at some neighboring counties as well. Washtenaw County as Al-Sayed was expected to do very well here. He did. He only won it, though, by 14 points. You would expect his margins to be a little bit stronger than that if he was having a great night like the polls were saying he was going to have. He'd probably be winning this at the bare minimum by more than 20% of the vote. You look at Oakland County, Macomb County, Haley Stevens doing well here, St. Clair County as well. Livingston goes for Al-Sayed, but very narrowly. You can look Jackson, Ingham County, Eaton County. Look also Kalamazoo County is going a good example. Al-Sayed wins here pretty reliably. Again, maybe expanding the margins a little bit, but for Al-Sayed, but again, strong wins there. And you want to look up here in these parts of the state as well, Genesee County, Saginaw County. These are two areas that, again, whether Al-Sayed won them or not, you expect him to be doing a little bit stronger based on how he's performing. And Haley Stevens won Genesee County by about 13 points. She won Saginaw County by almost 20 points. And you can go up in Tuscola County as well, smaller, Sanila County as well. These are smaller areas, but Haley Stevens ran up the vote in a lot of these portions of the state. When going into the election night, you would expect, okay, well, Abdul Al-Sayed's probably going to win all these or win them very handily because he's crushing Haley Stevens in the polls, and that really just did not come to fruition at all last night. So ultimately, what to take away from this race is there's a lot of factors you can consider why Abdul Al-Sayed did poorly or more poor than expected. There's a lot of factors why Haley Stevens did better than expected, including having a lot of important endorsements from people like the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, for Haley Stevens, but it ended up being a very, very close primary. And now it's going to be a very important question for November for 2026 because the winning candidate, Abdul Al-Sayed, is now facing off against Mike Rogers. And at very least, nearly half of the Democratic primary did not vote, or over half of the Democratic primary did not vote for Abdul Al-Sayed. Is he going to get a majority of those voters to come out and support him in November? Yes, he will, no doubt. That's usually how primaries work. Even in very close races where the top of the ticket candidate does lose, of these 51% or so, 51.5% of voters that voted against Abdul Al-Sayed, is he going to get at least like 45% of them to come out and vote for him? Absolutely, yes, he will. The question is going to be, can he get close to all of these voters to get out and vote for him? Or are there going to be a few Stevens voters that say they're uncomfortable with him being the candidate and maybe either stay home or even go out and vote for Mike Rogers is going to be a very real question. I've seen the comparisons online, on Twitter specifically, of this being like the 2022 primary of Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania and how that ultimately ended up going for the Democrats at the top of the ticket. And it's a really interesting conversation. I definitely think it could, but it's also a little bit different in the fact that in 2022, it was supposed to be a Republican midterm night where the Republicans did well. And I think the overturning of Roe v. Wade really sparked a lot of Democratic voter enthusiasm, where it just ultimately ended up being more of like a Republican like ripple, less so than like a Republican wave. And poor Republican candidates in places like Pennsylvania, where Dr. Oz certainly played a role in that. Could that happen in Michigan as well, with Abdul Al-Sayed being a poor Democratic candidate? It could, but that could also only happen with the benefit of hindsight, where we know that if Abdul Al-Sayed loses, then we would say that. But at this current point in time, at the beginning of August, he just won a very close primary, but still, President Trump and the National Republicans are disapproved of by a good amount. At very least, I would say this race is still in the tilt Democratic category for Abdul Al-Sayed. I wouldn't go so far in saying he's a terrible candidate like some online are saying. I still think he starts out as the favorite to win this race right now. But is the race going to get closer now that we know it's Abdul Al-Sayed versus Mike Rogers instead of Haley Stevens? Yes, I think it will, no doubt. I think we're going to see this race be under 5 points. I don't think that's very much of a surprise. If you've seen my prior predictions, I've been saying that for literally over a year now. I think we're going to continue to see that. Had Haley Stevens won, I think we'd probably see like a 5-point margin of victory in Michigan over Mike Rogers. Abdul Al-Sayed, I think we're looking right around like a 1.5 to a 2-point victory for Al-Sayed right now. But this is going to be a very close race. Michigan has been very close the last 2 election cycles, and I expect that to continue. But now with the general election officially set between Abdul Al-Sayed and Mike Rogers, the real campaign begins. But this is going to be interesting to revisit in a few months or so. If Abdul Al-Sayed ends up defeating Mike Rogers, we're going to look at this primary result and say, okay, a lot of those Haley Stevens voters went to his side and ultimately it didn't end up costing him the election. But if Mike Rogers finds a way to pull off the upset and win the race, are we going to look back at this primary sort of the same way? Republicans may look back on the Dr. Oz primary or the Herschel Walker primary and say, ooh, did we Do we pick the wrong candidate? Would the other candidate have won? These are going to be interesting conversations to have a few months from now. If you want to sound off in the comment section down below on that as well, please feel free. But I just think it's an interesting topic, an interesting conversation to talk about right now. Other than that, I mean, there's not really too much to take away from the primary other than just it was a shock at how close it was. It really was. Again, none of the polls showed it being this close. In fact, we probably should go through here and see if there's any polls in the last few days. None of them since Mallory McMorrow dropped out of the race, aside from Glenn Garrett Group, which showed Stevens up by 7. That one obviously was off. But then Tavern Research showed 41 for El Sayed and 42 for Stevens, back with 18% undecided. You could argue maybe by a margin that's probably the closest one we saw, but none of the polls really got it super close in this regard. But Democratic primary now is officially in the books in the state of Michigan. Abdul Al-Sayed does officially defeat Haley Stevens. He is the Democratic candidate, and he'll be facing off against Mike Rogers in the general election. Also, I did actually want to just show, because I'm going to go on to the general election part as well, we'll show some of the endorsements as well, and then we'll show the fundraising. This is what Abdul Al-Sayed had for his endorsements. If you want to pause the video and take a closer look at these, you absolutely can. I'm not going to read all of them because it's going to take a very long time, but again, this was very similar to a Zohran Mamdani type of election for Abdul Al-Sayed. He's among that farther left Democratic Socialists of America group. Haley Stevens very much has the backing of the establishment Democrats in Washington of the past 30 to 40 years or so. That was this proxy primary, as we sort of see a Democratic Tea Party movement going on between the Democratic Socialists of America and the establishment Democrats. We see that same similar type of situation unfolding right now. And ultimately, Abdul Al-Sayed ekes out a very narrow victory, but he does win. In terms of the overall money and how it looked, as of July 15th, Al-Sayed raised about $14.5 million. Haley Stevens raised about a little bit under $12 million, with them relatively even towards the end on cash on hand, about $2.5 million to $2.8 million for Al-Sayed versus Stevens for that. As for the general election, where things start, a little bit of a mix here. To the rankings, Decision Desk and Fox News have it listed as lean for the Democrats. Rachel White House has it tilt Democrat. The Economist has it as toss-up, while as the Cook Political Report, Sablo Crystal Ball, Real Clear Politics, and Inside Elections have the race listed as toss-up. In case there was any wondering of post-primary endorsements, if Haley Stevens would support Abdul Al-Sayed, Haley Stevens already came out and endorsed him. And in a statement, she said Stevens announced she would support Al-Sayed in the general election and thanked her supporters today, obviously on August 5th. So that is in the book. So maybe Haley Stevens, by doing so, gets a lot of her supporters onto Al-Sayed's side. Mallory McMorrow, the other Democratic candidate that was in the race, has come out and endorsed Abdul Al-Sayed as well, as she said she was going to endorse the winner there. In terms of the polling and the fundraising for the general election, starting out, again, Abdul Al-Sayed's raised about $14.5 million. Mike Rogers has raised a little bit under $11 million. Currently, Rogers has about $4.5 or so million cash on hand. Al-Sayed has about $2.5, but I'm expecting these numbers are going to grow very, very quickly. This should be one of, if not the most expensive Senate race in 2026. Texas will probably be higher, just given how many people live in the state of Texas, but this one should definitely raise a ton of money as well. Now, in terms of the polling data where things currently start, this could change very quickly, but right now, Mike Rogers does have the leg up over Abdul Al-Sayed in this race on the polling averages. Rogers is currently up 2.2% at 45.3% of the vote. Abdul Al-Sayed's at 43.1%, with 11.6% voting other or undecided. Now, stop me if you heard this before, but there's a lot of undecided vote, and what those undecided voters ultimately do are going to decide whether Al-Sayed or Mike Rogers ends up winning. So while today, Mike Rogers does have a narrow lead in the polling averages, and if the election were held today, you could argue Mike Rogers would probably eke out a narrow victory. What happens between now and November, and what those undecided voters ultimately do, is going to decide how this goes. Because unless something catastrophic happens for Al-Sayed or Rogers, given how competitive Michigan has been in the past few Senate races, we know Mike Rogers will get 45% of the vote or more. We also know Abdul Al-Sayed will get 43% of the vote or more. That remaining 12% or so that's undecided is going to decide what ultimately happens in the general election. So now the race is officially on between Abdul Al-Sayed and Mike Rogers. Who do you think is going to win that Senate race in November? And who do you think, or what do you think of the primary and how it all unfolded? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section down below. For now, though, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in a future video. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, I really appreciate it if you could hit like and hit subscribe as well. It would really help me and my channel out a whole lot if you could do that for me. You can see in the circle in the top left the subscribe here button to subscribe to the channel. On the right, there are going to be two video pop-ups for you. My latest video will be on the top, and a recommended playlist by myself will be on the bottom as well. In the bottom left of the screen, you'll see my channel name, Anthony's Election Center, which you are currently watching. On my Facebook, Anthony.ElectionCenter is also there. And if you want to reach out to me on email, anthpredicts@gmail.com is my email. Feel free to pause the video if you need to. If you want to look for any of these, obviously in more time, please feel free. But for now, though, that is it. I really thank you all for watching and hope to see you in a future video.